A federal agent is on leave. A woman is determined to make his life hell because of a stupid rule. You won't believe what happens when she takes things too far and hires fake police to arrest him. Don't miss the next developments, because the truth will shock everyone. Listen closely. New neighbor. In my kingdom. You either follow my rules or you get the hell out. The words, delivered with a sickly sweet smile, hit Jack Rowan like a poisoned needle. He stood on his own lawn, facing Karen, at about 35. Karen had the look of someone with too much time and money. She wore a skin-tight yoga outfit from an expensive brand, showing off a firm body honed by hours at the gym. Her blonde hair was pulled into a perfect high bun, and her wrinkle-free face, probably Botox, stared at him with a smug smile. She was the living definition of suburban entitlement. For the past few weeks, Karen had turned Jack's vacation into a sick joke. Everything he did was wrong in her eyes. The trash can, the dandelion, the fact that he dared to park his pickup truck where she could see it. Each time, Jack chose to back down. He was too tired for the hassle. He just wanted to be left alone. But today, that peace ended. The cause was a simple wooden swing set he'd just built for his niece. "I don't give a damn what permit you have from the city," Karen said, her voice shifting from sweet to acidic. She pointed at the swing set, her manicured fingernail looking like a weapon. "This is an HOA community. HOA rules are law here. You've made an unauthorized change to the landscape. Take it down. Now." Jack took a deep breath. He'd had enough. The condescension, the commanding tone, the self-appointed authority of this woman. It made him sick. He stepped toward her, closing the distance between them. "First," he said, his voice low and dangerous, completely different from his previous mild-mannered tone. "You're trespassing on my property. Get out. Second, this swing set is staying right where it is. And third, don't you ever speak to me in that tone again. We are not friends." Karen's friendly mask shattered. She was stunned, then furious. No one in this neighborhood dared to challenge her. "Oh, a tough guy. Are we?" she sneered. "Who do you think you are? You're an outsider, a mistake. And I'm going to fix that mistake by running you out of here." "Feel free," Jack replied curtly, turning his back. "I'm not done with you," Karen screeched, her fake grace vanishing completely, revealing her raw, shrill nature. Just then, two men appeared out of nowhere, looking like they'd walked off the set of a B-list crime movie. They wore tight black t-shirts, revealing cheap tattoos and bulging muscles. They were definitely not licensed security. "Need some help, boss," one of them asked Karen, but his thuggish gaze was fixed on Jack. A triumphant smile spread across Karen's face. Her cavalry had arrived. "This man here," she said dramatically, "is disturbing the peace. He built an illegal structure and then threatened me. You know what to do." The other guy stepped onto the grass, advancing on Jack. "Listen, pal," he growled. "The boss gave an order. Take that thing down, or we'll take you down." Jack didn't even glance at him. He focused only on Karen, and his federal agent's instincts were screaming red alert. This wasn't a civil dispute. This was an organized conspiracy, intimidation, extortion. This was criminal territory. "You're crossing a dangerous line, Karen," Jack said slowly, enunciating every word. "You're making a mistake you won't be able to fix." Karen let out a sharp, cold laugh. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a venomous whisper. "The only mistake here was you thinking you could fight me. Do you know what happened to the last owners of this house? They thought they were tough, too. But they ended up selling at a massive loss and running away in the middle of the night with nothing. You'll have the same ending." That was it, the brazen confession, the final threat. Jack stared straight into Karen's smug eyes. He no longer saw an annoying neighbor. He saw a criminal, the head of a small-time extortion racket who got off on terrorizing people. His vacation had evaporated, but a new mission had just begun. Karen had made a fatal mistake. She had just confessed her crimes to a U.S. Marshal. And now he wasn't just going to protect his swing set, he was going to dismantle her entire kingdom. Jack didn't sleep that night. He sat in the darkness of his living room, the silence broken only by the soft click-clack of him assembling and checking his Sig Sauer P-129. He was no longer a man on vacation. He was a soldier waiting for the enemy to enter his territory. The next morning, the sky was ironically clear and blue. Jack decided to face the storm head-on. He took Buster, his good-natured Labrador, out to the front yard and tossed him a tennis ball. He wanted the illusion of normalcy, the perfect bait. He knew they couldn't resist the temptation of a public assault. He was right. A black, unlicensed sedan screeched down the street and then slammed to a halt in front of his house, kicking up a cloud of dust. The two cops from before got out, their faces showing no patience this time. "Up early playing with your dog." Rowan, the one with the mustache, growled, stalking directly onto the lawn, ignoring the walkway. "I told you we'd be back." Buster sensed the danger, planting himself in front of Jack and barking loudly. "You don't shut that dog up, I'll shut him up permanently," the younger one said, his cruel gaze fixed on Buster. "Get off my property," Jack said, his voice as cold as ice. He rose to his feet, placing himself between the attackers and his dog. "You don't give the orders here," the mustached one snarled. "You're coming with us today, one way or another, walking or carried out." The younger one, perhaps trying to show off, made his move. He lost his patience and swung a vicious kick toward Buster. That was the final line. Jack moved like lightning. He didn't block the kick. He moved inside it. His hand snatched the young man's ankle in midair and twisted. A dry, sickening crack echoed. The young man let out a horrific scream as his ankle snapped. Jack didn't stop. He pulled, unbalancing him, and then brutally slammed his face into the grass. He was out cold instantly. The mustached man froze for a split second, stunned by the savage efficiency of the counterattack. Panic overrode reason, and he fumbled for his pistol. You're dead," he screamed, leveling the gun at Jack. He made the classic amateur mistake, drawing a weapon when the opponent is already too close. Before his finger could tighten on the trigger, Jack lunged. He didn't try a fancy disarm. He crashed into the man, one hand grabbing the gun wrist, the other slamming into his elbow. Bang! The explosion tore through the morning quiet of the suburbs. The sharp crack of the gunshot echoed through the neighborhood. The bullet hit no one. It sparked off the concrete walkway. Inches from Jack's foot, screams erupted from behind the windows of neighboring houses. In that moment of chaos, Jack was in complete control. He wrenched the mustached man's wrist, forcing him to drop the pistol in a spasm of pain. He used the man's own momentum to throw him to the ground, securing him in a controlled chokehold, tight enough to immobilize but not to kill. Sirens began to wail in the distance, growing closer. The gunshot had guaranteed their arrival. Jack stood up, brushing himself off, his face in a motionless mask. He looked down at the two bodies lying motionless on his lawn. The game was over. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out his leather wallet. He didn't need to say a word. He just flipped it open. In the bright morning sun, the golden badge of the United States Marshal Service glittered like a death sentence. U.S. Marshal. The two thugs, one with a broken ankle, the other subdued, and all the peeking neighbors now understood. They hadn't just witnessed a fight. They had just watched a wolf shed its sheep's clothing. Karen Miller had started a war with a federal agent on his home turf, and she was about to pay the price. Police sirens tore through the air, quickly escalating from a distant wail to a deafening roar right outside on the street. 3 patrol cars from the Oakwood Creek Police Department screeched to a halt. Forming a semicircle around Jack's front yard, officers, trained for a shots-fired scenario, drew their weapons, taking cover behind their car doors and yelling, "Everybody down! Hands on your head!" Jack didn't flinch. He remained standing, a tall, imposing figure between the two downed bodies, his U.S. Marshal's badge still gleaming in his hand. Buster, the loyal Buzzgun, sat silently beside him, no longer barking, just letting out a low growl, sensing the authority radiating from his owner. "Federal Agent Rowan," Jack yelled, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The situation is under control. Suspects are neutralized. We have one officer down. Request an ambulance immediate." He glanced at the young man with the shattered ankle. "Scratch that, 2 officers down." The door of the lead patrol car opened, and an older, sturdy man in a crisp police chief's uniform stepped out. It was the local chief of police, David Brody. He squinted at the scene before him, 2 men in uniform on the ground, a civilian who looked alarmingly calm, and a federal badge. He signaled for his officers to lower their weapons, but to remain vigilant. "Agent Rowan," Brody said, approaching cautiously. "What the hell is going on here? My dispatcher said we had shots fired." "That's correct, Chief," Jack replied, his voice even. "These 2 individuals, impersonating local police, trespassed on my property, assaulted me, and assaulted my animal. When I defended myself, this subject," he gestured to the mustached man being checked by paramedics, "drew his weapon and fired. The bullet is right there." He pointed to the chip in the concrete. Brody bent down to look at the bullet mark, then back at the 2 assailants being loaded onto stretchers. He glanced at the cheap-looking pistol an officer had secured, then back at Jack's shining badge. The pieces were falling into place. "Impersonating officers," Brody muttered, shaking his head. "Son of a bitch." Meanwhile, across the street, Karen Miller stood frozen behind her curtains. Her plan had spectacularly imploded. She had expected to see Jack humiliated and led away in handcuffs. Instead, she was watching her own hired goons being taken away in ambulances under police supervision. And that detestable neighbor. He was speaking to Chief Brody as if they were colleagues. The anxiety in Karen's gut quickly turned into a cold, sickening panic. She fumbled for her phone and dialed her lawyer. Jack missed nothing. He gestured toward the neighbors who were now gathered on their doorsteps. "They're all witnesses. Chief, they saw these 2 initiate the assault." Brody nodded and ordered an officer to start taking statements. Then he turned back to Jack. "Agent Rowan, do you have any idea who sent them?" Jack looked directly across the street, his gaze drilling through Karen's window like a laser. "I have a pretty solid theory." "Chief," without another word, Jack strode across the street. Chief Brody and 2 other officers immediately fell in step behind him. The powerful procession did not go unnoticed by the neighborhood. They marched straight to the crimson-red door of Karen's perfectly manicured home. Jack raised his hand and knocked. Not the brutish pound of her hired thugs, but 3 sharp, decisive raps that echoed like a judge's gavel. A few seconds later, the door creaked open. Karen appeared, trying to paste on a look of innocent concern. She wore a silk robe, her hair artfully disheveled. "Oh, Chief Brody, thank God you're here, that man across the street. He's insane, he attacked my security staff." Jack's smile was ice cold. "Your security?" "Karen, they told me they were police officers. They had fake badges, a fake warrant, and a very real gun." Karen's face went pale. She stammered, I don't know anything about that. I just hired them to provide security for the community." "Cut the act," Jack interrupted, his voice hard as steel, leaving no room for lies. "Does Creekwood Property Management Services ring a bell? What about the names of the previous owners of my house, the Clarks, the Petersons? They all tell a similar story: harassed, fined with ridiculous fees, threatened until they sold at a loss and ran. That's your business model, isn't it? Karen extortion." Every word Jack spoke was another nail in the coffin of Karen's criminal enterprise. Her mask shattered, revealing raw fear and cornered rage. "You have no proof," she hissed. "I don't need it," Jack replied. "Your 2 goons are on their way to the hospital and then to an interrogation room. They will say anything to save their own skins. Your scam is over." Chief Brody, having heard everything he needed to, stepped forward. "Ms. Miller," he said in a stern, official tone, You'll need to come with us to the station to answer some questions. Please cooperate." Karen looked at Jack, her eyes blazing with hatred and desperation. She had been the queen of this kingdom, but in a single morning, it had all crumbled. She had picked a fight with the one person she shouldn't have. She had tried to evict a federal marshal, and now she was the one about to be evicted from her life of luxury. The fall of Karen Miller wasn't a trial, it was a psychological execution, and Jack Rowan was the executioner. Immediately after being handcuffed, Karen showed no fear. In the interrogation room, she maintained the air of a wrongly accused queen. She screamed for her lawyer, threatening to sue the entire police department for wrongful arrest. "You have no idea who you're messing with," she snarled at Chief Brody. "This city will burn for this." But in another interrogation room, just steps away, her fortress was being dismantled by the very bricks she thought were her strongest. Her two thugs, facing decades in federal prison, were tripping over each other to betray her. They didn't just talk, they gushed. A torrent of information that painted a portrait of a ruthless, tyrannical mastermind who despised the law and was drunk on her own power. They served Karen up on a silver platter in exchange for a deal. The final confrontation didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened in a bleak, gray hallway of the police station a few days later. Jack was reviewing the mountain of evidence with Brody when they led Karen past. She was in shackles, both wrist and ankle, the orange jumpsuit seeming to swallow her whole. When she saw Jack, the hatred in her eyes flared. "You," she hissed, her voice acidic. "This is all your fault. You destroyed everything." Jack signaled for Brody to hold up. He turned slowly, facing her. He said nothing, simply picking up a photograph from the evidence file. It was a picture of the Peterson family, the previous owners of his house. They looked haunted, exhausted, standing in front of the for sale sign with an undisguisable sadness. "Destroyed?" Jack asked, his voice low and devoid of all emotion. "I call it a fumigation. Take a good look. Karen, these are real people, real families. You trampled on their lives for your own sick ego and greed. They were weak. They deserved it." She screamed, trying to pull away from the guard. Jack shook his head, a cold, mirthless smile touching his lips. He stepped closer, close enough for her to hear his whisper. "You're wrong. You're the weak one. You're afraid. Afraid of someone not following your rules. Afraid of a pickup truck, a swing set, a flag. You built a kingdom not out of strength, but out of your own fear." He paused, looking directly into her blazing eyes, and delivered the killing blow. "And now your greatest fear has come true. You've lost control completely, forever." Something inside Karen shattered. It wasn't a scream, it was a collapse from within. The arrogance, the smugness, the hatred. It all evaporated, leaving only a hollow void, a horrifying truth she could no longer escape. She had lost. She was nothing. The sentencing hearing was a formality. The evidence was absolute. When the judge handed down a 15-year sentence with no possibility of parole, Karen had no reaction. She just sat there, lifeless, an empty shell. The queen was well and truly dead. Back in Oakwood Creek, Jack could feel the change. It wasn't just peace, it was the air itself. People could finally breathe freely. Months later, on a late afternoon, Jack sat on his porch, drinking a cold beer. Buster was sleeping peacefully at his feet. He looked across the street at what was once Karen's palace. A new family had moved in. A little pink bicycle lay on the lawn. The clear, happy laughter of a little girl playing in her yard drifted across the street. Jack smirked. That was the sound of a community, not the silence of fear. He raised his beer, not in celebration of a victory, but in a toast to a simple truth. He'd come here looking for a vacation. Instead, he'd had to go hunting. But sometimes, to get peace, you have to fight for it. And now, in the sound of a child's laughter replacing a tyrant's snarl, that peace was truly sweet. The game was over. and he was the only one left standing. Finally, justice is served, a story about an individual's abuse of power and the unexpected ending when the underdog is the one who holds the real power. Thank you for watching. If you like this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about the character or plot that impressed you the most. See you in the next stories.